We hope you enjoy the show.
Hey y'all, welcome to DDT Divas The Podcast. DDT Divas The Podcast gives you the who, what, when, where, how, and why in Black pro wrestling. Whether it's talking with the hottest Black wrestlers in the industry or chatting with Black content creators and Black superfans, DDT Divas got you. I'm your host, Sade. In this episode, we're going to do something a little different. Usually, I invite a guest on the show and we talk about the guest's wrestling journey or journey into wrestling. But on this episode, the guest star and I are just going to talk about wrestling. Wrestling in its current state. We are going to talk about modern day wrestling. So, before he and I get to talking about wrestling, it's time for the usual housekeeping announcements. Most importantly, 2020 is almost here, so DDT Divas has great things planned with some great people. You are not going to want to miss anything. That's why you need to subscribe to DDTDivas.com, follow DDT Divas on Twitter and Instagram, join the DDT Divas Discord, and like the DDT Divas page on Facebook. Also, subscribe to DDT Divas on YouTube. And if you love DDT Divas The Podcast, be sure to check out all of the previous episodes on Anchor, Apple Podcasts, Breaker, Google Podcasts, Overcast, Pocket Cast, Radio Public, and Spotify. Okay, now let's talk about wrestling. One of the coolest things about this episode, guests, is that we both wanted to look at wrestling from our perspectives. My perspective as a Black woman and his perspective as a Black man. We are not going to hold back. We're just going to talk about wrestling. So without wasting any more time, let me introduce my guest for this episode. So this episode's guest, he is a wrestling writer who writes for Blerds Online, a longtime Black wrestling fan who is also a gamer and a blerd. Everyone give a warm welcome to Kwame Shakir. Welcome to DDT Divas The Podcast, Kwame Shakir. How are you?
I'm doing good. How are you?
I'm good. I'm happy to have you on the show today.
Yeah, it feels real exciting for real.
I know we've been talking on Twitter a lot about wrestling, and this episode I want to talk about wrestling from the eyes of Black wrestling fans, modern day wrestling.
Yes, exactly.
And I want to look at the African diaspora in wrestling, the way Black wrestlers are reviewed, how they are treated. The way people talk about them, it's totally different. So I think it's an important conversation to have.
Yeah, I'm very excited to take part in this important conversation because I know that when these predominantly cis white male podcasters talk about Black wrestlers, they talk about them in ways that come off to me as condescending and disingenuous.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so I get what you're saying.
So let's just start off. I want to start off by talking about wrestling and you as a wrestling writer. I want to take it back to when you first became a wrestling fan. When did you start watching wrestling?
Prior to wrestling, I was going through, personal and emotional turmoil in my life. I nearly drowned to death, during the school field trip, witnessing my second auntie, died from a massive OD, aka overdosing. And, seeing my two oldest brothers being shipped off to prison, that took a lot out of me right there. That made me have thoughts of suicide and all that until one day the OG Power Rangers came on TV. When I saw the OG Power Rangers, that show absolutely saved my life. And, I love that show so much. I watched every episode, unfortunately, until its final episode, like November '95. And then I was also in the video games. I'm a big nerd too, by the way. I love playing video games, and I was playing games like Mario and Sonic and Streets of Rage 2 and stuff like that back then. But then like when I was 12 years old, I remember on a hot July night, I was flipping through the channels and found absolutely nothing interesting until I tuned in to Nitro and saw this one particular match, and the crowd, man, was absolutely electrifying. And man, I like the story, the chemistry, the psychology, man, was absolutely pretty good in this match. And after I watched that match, I'm like, you know what? I became a wrestling fan tonight by just watching this match. So that match right there for me on Nitro was my personal introduction to wrestling.
Do you remember the match?
Oh, it was Goldberg versus Hogan.
Okay. Do you remember the year? I'm trying to like go back and think about
it was like July 6th, '98.
Okay.
Yeah, because I actually caught the main event. I missed out on most of the other show, but it was just that main event that I caught it. It was really my inspiration and introduction to wrestling.
And as you got older, did you stick with wrestling, or have you decided like at a certain age you're going to take a break and come back to it, or have you just been watching ever since and no breaks?
Well, after WCW went on I watched WWE and then as I was watching WWE, I noticed there were things that pissed me off, like the racist angle between Booker and Triple H in 2003 during one of the worst periods in the history of Monday Night Raw, the infamous reign of terror with Triple H on Raw, and then there was other little racist angles and stuff like that, like the Mama Boy thing with Shelton Benjamin. Oh my God, I hated it.
Yeah, I remember that.
I hated it so much that I'm like, and then WWE's poor handling of Eddie and Chris's untimely deaths and stuff, and I'm like, forget this. I'm going to take a break. So I took a break from wrestling from like 2008 to like 2018 when I got back into it 2 years ago. So I know a lot of fans have openly stated that they've taken personal sabbaticals from wrestling. Even I did for 10 years until I got back in it 2 years ago with WrestleMania 34.
See, I'm actually one of the fans that haven't taken a break. So I started watching when I was a kid with family, and I just kept on watching. And I guess maybe you could kind of say I took a break in college, because I did kind of, when I was a kid and when I was in like high school, I would never miss an episode. Like I had to watch wrestling. Even if it was like taped, I had to watch it. But then when I got a little bit into my college years, the 4 years of college, it was like, okay, if I miss it, it's okay. Because some of the stuff wasn't that good,
Oh.
So like if I miss it, I miss it. But I'm one of the few fans. I know there's probably a lot of people listening who maybe have never even taken a break. So I'm always wondering, why people take breaks from wrestling and what brings them back in. So what actually brought you back to wrestling?
But before I answer that question, not only but WWE was the biggest culprit why I took a sabbatical, but also, I felt like, I had outgrown wrestling, and also I had suffered a couple of horrific family tragedies, like losing my oldest nephew to horizontal violence, and losing one of my old female friends that I grew up in the hood with. All that stuff right there, kept me away from wrestling during that sabbatical period. But what brought me back into wrestling was like, I remember one day I was, sitting alone and thinking, man, I think I missed out on wrestling after 10 years. And I'm like, I got to go back to something that I love, that I used to love, for WWE sucked that out of me. And then when I got back into wrestling, it was like the spark just ignited in me all over again.
Yeah. Do you remember, just trying to go deep into it a little bit, do you remember, like, was it a particular wrestler or a match or something, like a promo that actually like kind of ignited the spark?
Well, I remember, like I said, in 2018, I got back into wrestling, and then it was really that All In event in Chicago that got me back into wrestling because I love that event. Absolutely phenomenal. So
Yeah, all in, yeah, that was really good. Like, I actually didn't see it when it first happened, but like, I think maybe a couple months ago, like it was during like this year during the pandemic, like maybe March. I actually bought it and watched it, but I really enjoyed the show.
yeah, because man, the crowds, man, wrestling to me, like I said in a tweet, I said the pandemic era is the worst uh, period in the history of wrestling right now because with everything going on with COVID and everything, COVID has been running wild all over the place this year, especially in wrestling. So it's always, saddening to see when you hear some of these wrestlers like AJ Gray who tested positive for COVID recently. And, the main thing that I'm trying to say is all the wrestlers need to, make sure that they take the necessary precautions to stay safe and to avoid being potentially exposed to, people who may have COVID.
Yeah, I anyone who's suffering from COVID, wrestlers, I think it's important that we support them, buy their merch, get their name out there, because this pandemic has been really hard, and I can see how it's been hard on the independent scene. It's just been rough.
Yeah, it has been so rough, and I'm like, man, the indie wrestling scene has been hit the hardest by the pandemic this year alone. Because for months they didn't do any shows, but then all of a sudden recently they started back doing shows. And the Black Wrestlers Matter and Fulton Culture events are my favorite wrestling events of the entire year. And the reason why, because if you look at the match cards for those two events, most of the matches are unpredictable, unlike the mainstream wrestling promotions today. Those match cards are so predictable. You already know, for the most part, who's going to win the match, which sucks because I love unpredictability in wrestling.
Now I want to talk a little bit about you as a writer. You write for Blerds Online and you cover wrestling. How do you get started writing for Blerds Online?
Yeah, I actually reached out to the brother a couple of years ago that runs the site. And I said, hey, I want to write articles for your site, and he's like, you know what? Hey, why don't you send me an article and I'll see how much I like it. And then I got another email saying that he liked it, and he published it, and the rest is history.
You have some really good articles on there, and I actually encourage anyone who's listening to this podcast episode to check out Kwame. He has some really good articles on Blerds Online, so definitely check out his work. He's always like keeping on top of things, and he's always making sure he is covering it from a Black perspective, because we don't have a lot of Black. We do have a lot of good Black podcasters, writers, but they're not as mainstream as the general typical white cis white male blogger or podcaster. So now I want to just kind of talk about the state of wrestling, and I want to kind of start off with like a general kind of look, and then kind of go into specifics, if that's okay with you.
Well, one of the things that I do like about modern day wrestling is that there's more diversity and representation in wrestling, because when we were growing up watching wrestling, we didn't see that many wrestlers on TV that looked like us. And that was one of the most frustrating parts for us as Black wrestling fans at the time. But now, with modern day wrestling nowadays, especially in the indies, you're seeing so much representation and diversity. It is a beautiful sight to see.
Yep. And I think about that a lot. Like when I was a kid, like you said, we didn't see that much. Like I'm a 90s baby. So I got to see like, Jazz and WWE and Miss Jacqueline, but now there's so many talented Black women in wrestling.
Yeah, man, I love Bianca Belair, dude. I cannot get enough of Bianca Belair, Naomi, and Sasha Banks and Ember Moon. those women in WWE right now, those black women I just mentioned, are killing it.
Yep. It's time for them to, I want Sasha to get a very long reign. I want Bianca to get a long title reign. Naomi to come back. I just want to see the black women do so much.
Yeah, because man, I was so mad when they had Sasha drop the title on her very first defense, I think for the past 5 or 6 times. But then last week she finally retained, which made me happy and clapping.
She broke the curse.
Yeah, like I tweeted to you, she broke the curse. Finally broke the curse. I want her to have a 6-month title run, at least hold the title until WrestleMania next year.
And she's just that good. So, I don't see why it would be a problem for them not to allow her to do so.
Yeah, man. But my ideal dream match, and numerous other podcasters, even black, female podcasters have won this match. The technical Sasha versus the powerhouse Bianca Belair.
Yes, that's what I want that for WrestleMania. I want that match for WrestleMania.
Oh, man. If those two women main event, of course, knowing VKM, he's going to have Becky and Ronda as his main event at next year's WrestleMania, which I will not give 2 craps about. By the way, that match should have happened last year, but VKM ruined it with Charlotte.
Yeah, I guess he wanted to give Charlotte opportunity to make history, but I like triple threats and fatal 4-ways, but I'm kind of like, sometimes they can be okay, but then sometimes they can not be as good.
No, but you know what? You want to know what? There's one thing that I don't like about modern day wrestling: the overexposure of 6-man tag matches. How many times, Sade, have we seen 6-man tag team matches, and specifically in the main events, like we saw this past Monday night on Raw?
I feel like that's the easy way for wrestling companies, because you see it in so many companies. AEW's been doing it, WWE, you see it, because it's an easy thing, I guess, to, I don't know, I can't really say I'm not a booker, but to me it seems like an easy thing.
I feel like it's a lazy way to throw all these wrestlers together in a match without even having proper storylines or character development for them. That's how I look at it.
Sometimes they make sense, but sometimes they don't. Because from my assumption, which I'm actually going to talk about the Hurt Business in a little bit, but from my assumption with what's happening now is that the New Day and the Hurt Business got beef. So I don't know how the New Day got involved with the Randy, The Miz, Morrison, Drew McIntyre storyline.
When I saw a clip of that, I'm like, this makes no sense at all. I'm like, they had to have tore up and rewritten the script 5 or 6 times and had this approved 15 minutes before the show aired.
So I mentioned the Hurt Business. Now on a more specific level, let's talk about WWE's The Hurt Business. Okay. WWE's decision to form a fraction of 4 talented black wrestlers, and this has really revived these 4 black wrestlers' careers. MVP, Bobby Lashley, Shelton Benjamin, and Cedric Alexander. What are your thoughts on the Hurt Business?
Oh man, I really like the Hurt Business. They remind me of Evolution back in the day. When they had that run in 2003, 2004. During that particular period of Raw. But these brothers right here are amazing in the ring, and especially, man, I was glad that MVP took these brothers. He's like, you know what? I need to give these brothers that are not getting the opportunity that they should a chance. And ever since then, we have seen them frequently on WWE television. Hey, they look good in them suits, though.
Yeah, they really do. I like it.
Yeah, man. Seeing 4 strong brothers in suits, man, that always puts a smile on my face.
And I like that you mentioned that it reminded you more of Evolution. I know a lot of wrestling fans, the typical wrestling response is that they compare them to the Nation of Domination. So, and I know why they do it, because they're a group of black men, and I see that all the time. It's kind of annoying to me that people actually do that.
Yeah, it really is annoying. I think MVP did an interview saying that we're not trying to do what the Nation of Domination did back in the Attitude Era in the late 90s. We're trying to do our thing now.
Yep, and it's good, and I like it. And which brings me, like, how do you? Okay, so it's been a topic of conversation for some, including some Black wrestling fans, that some people have pointed out that the Hurt Business spends most of their time fighting other Black wrestlers. They've taken on Apollo and Ricochet, and now they're fighting New Day and Titus. What are your thoughts on that?
It reaches racial insensitivity in a way. Like they should be pushed to the main event scene, like you told me earlier. They should be pushed to the main event scene, not ball down in a mid card division that's not really the best. These four brothers should definitely get main event pushes, so they're very deserving to me of a main event push.
Yes, most definitely. And so I had been saying that like a while, like they were fighting Ricochet and then Apollo, and then they gave us this like they were gonna go against Retribution, and then they kind of like squashed it. That they like brought in Bray Wyatt, the Fiend, and that kind of like, I don't know, it just killed the moment. It just went down, and then now they're like have this beef against the New Day and Titus. So I kind of want to see them, like, I want to see the Hurt Business beat up, Jeff Hardy or AJ, or, I want to see, I always say this, like, anyone who, like, follows DDT Divas on social media knows that I always say, like you just said, they need to be in the main event scene. Yeah. Like, the Raw main event scene is a lot of white guys.
Yeah, and that's always been one of the most annoying things for me and you as Black wrestling fans, is that seeing these white dudes in the main event pit. I'm like, how come there's not any wrestlers that look like me in the main event scene? Come on, man, push these four brothers in the main event scene so that way they can get the shine and recognition that they deserve.
Yeah, and speaking of the main event scene, because I know WWE has a problem, like an issue with Black wrestlers in the main event scene. AEW has that problem when you look at like mainstream companies in the US, but Impact has done a really good job. And compared to other mainstream companies in the US, I think Impact Wrestling has done a decent job with Black talent. And right now, Rich Swann is the Impact World Champion. What are your thoughts on that?
Oh man, this dude is just absolutely amazing. I absolutely like Rich Swann, and I also love the fact that they trusted this Black man with the championship, because I think Impact's last Black World Champion, ironically, was Bobby Lashley in 2014. Yep.
And it looks like they're going with it looks like Rich Swann and Moose maybe. And then there's some interaction between Chris Bay, Rich Swann, so and then Willie Mack, who's friends with Rich Swann. So that I like what they're having these Black guys in, like, more towards the main event scene, like, interact. And I like that about Impact. And Impact does a good job with their Black wrestlers. I think they book their Black wrestlers well. And same thing with the women. The women's division is phenomenal.
Yeah, we know the women's division AEW has a lot of work. And not only that, unfortunately, I think I've jokingly said this, and this is true, the Divas era is alive and well in AEW. And the reason why I say that is because you and I both know most of the matches are below 10 minutes. And last night's match was below 10 minutes, which is absolute embarrassing.
Yeah, AEW really needs to do better with their women. Yeah. And that's why I say Impact is, in my opinion, Impact has the best women's division, because AEW, we can see the faults in AEW's women's division. WWE, NXT is good.
Yeah.
Raw is bad, because the Raw is just directionless, and they also have short matches on Raw.
Yeah, and even on SmackDown. But on Raw, like, when you try to tune into Raw, like, the lack of enthusiasm and excitement for Raw, it's not as high as it was, 15, 20, 25, like 15, 20 years ago. Nowadays, man, I scroll down Twitter sometimes, I see tweets from people saying, man, this show puts them to sleep, to a deep, deep sleep, or it just bores them, or they just flip the channel or play a Nintendo Switch.
I mean, this is why Raw needs the Hurt Business. I feel like it's a fresh, exciting, new, set of wrestlers to put in this main event scene. And, and then they have Keith Lee. He's there too. But, they really need to start interjecting some, new, fresh black wrestlers into their main event scene.
Oh, man. What we saw happen to Keith Lee on Raw after SummerSlam was, my God, atrocious. They changed this man's ring attire. They made him shave his beard off, and they gave him that god-awful generic music. Because the Limitless theme in the NXT that was done by CFO was absolute fire. Well, Keith Lee himself rapped all over the song, and I love that.
Yeah, and I think it was a song that fans could actually, like, you can sing it, like, at live events. You can actually, like, sing along, rap along with Keith Lee, and I think that really enhances the fan experience. But I guess now, because of the pandemic, there's no fans, so I've heard some things too, but I'm not sure how true they are about like the music and the rights to music and things like that. So
yeah, the problem is WWE is delivering phase now all the songs that CFO had made because they refuse to pay CFO and royalties. That's just how petty WWE is nowadays, because WWE is the modern day Death Row Records. Yep. They remind me of Death Row when they were at their peak back in the 90s. With Sean, Snoop, Tupac, and Dre. Those were the heavy hitters of Death Row back in the day.
So just to like go back a little bit to Impact Wrestling, like I said, Impact Wrestling really does a good job with their black wrestlers and with women's wrestling. But why do you think so many people say that they don't look at Impact or they overlook Impact?
Well, for many years, during the infamous reign of terror from like 2010 to 2014, I didn't watch Impact for many years because of that. I think it was like 2 years ago that I got back into Impact, and I'm like, man, they are really putting on some pretty decently good shows. And I'm liking what I'm seeing here in Impact, especially with the brothers in the main event scene that you just mentioned. And man, even back like in the mid to late 2000s, during the golden days of Impact when they were known as TNA, man, they had some fire matches, especially those brothers. And just the other day, I saw Eli Skipper from a throwback 2004 clip. He climbed on top of the cage and did a Hurricane Rana off the top of the cage.
I saw that clip. I actually kind of remember it because my grandfather, he loved wrestling. Like, he'll look at any wrestling, any company, no matter who's wrestling. So he kind of got me, like, I would look at TNA Impact with him. So, I actually kind of remember that. You remember Monty Brown?
Oh, yeah. The pounce that he did was nasty. The pounce that Monty Brown did was nasty. And this dude had a special type of amazing charisma on the mic.
Yeah, he actually recently cut like a promo video for Lance Archer. So he actually, and so that's a lot, like that was like a couple weeks ago. He did a video for Lance Archer before John Moxley.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it was really cool. It was Monty Brown. Like he went old school on us.
Man, hey, I love Monty Brown from back in the day.
So now I want to try to talk about the independent scene. I know you said you love independent wrestling, and we kind of already touched on this, but this year has been a really good year for Black, LGBTQA+, and the women's wrestling on the independent scene.
Yeah.
It's been a good year. And we had PAWDWC presents Fight Club Pro Wrestling. We had Paris is Bumping. We had For the Culture. We had Black Wrestlers Matter. We had Elfie's Big Gay Brunch. And Mission Pro Wrestling. Like, it's been a really good year. Have you been keeping up with a lot of these shows?
Well, hey, I have been at least watching some of the matches, and as a matter of fact, I'm very excited for the future of Black Wrestlers Matter and For the Culture. Man, when those events got announced, I knew I was going to watch it, and when I watched it, I fell in love because that was unapologetic blackness that I was seeing. And plus, the commentary for Black Wrestling Matter was absolute amazing. I loved it. I loved every minute of that commentary.
Yes, they had some good. It was good. Like, I want to know. Do you know who the guys were on commentary? Like, they did a really good job. Like,
Oh no, they're better than the commentary teams in AEW, NXT, let alone the WWE main roster where they're over scripted and micromanaged.
yeah, those guys on the Black Wrestling Matter did a good job.
Man, I absolutely, just love that Black Wrestlers Matter commentary team, and they did announce that Black Wrestling Matter 2 will happen on Juneteenth of next year.
That is historic.
Yeah, and for the culture too, I think that's going to happen probably during WrestleMania weekend, like it should have happened during WrestleMania weekend this year, but it didn't due to the pandemic.
Did you have any favorite matches in particular?
Oh man, my favorite match from the Black Wrestlers Matter event was ACH versus JDX. The main event of that show. When was the last time you seen two black men main event a wrestling show?
Yep.
Man, these guys put on clinic. The chemistry, the story, the psychology, and the emotion of this match was absolutely phenomenal. And my favorite match from the For the Culture event is AJ Gray versus Desmond Xavier. Ooh. Man, they absolutely killed it with that match, man. Especially when AJ Gray, man, hit the dude with that powerful clothesline. and you know what? That also reminds me of Trisha Dora when she hit that lariat tunnel on Shaw D for the second time. It was absolute nasty. I'm like, she almost ripped this man's head off.
Yeah, she's the PAWDWC Fight Club Pro Wrestling champ. She's the people's champ. And how do you feel about that title? Like, I actually was very blessed, very lucky to actually go to the shows because the shows were in DC. So I was there when she won. Like, I was at that match, and this is like in February before COVID like hit us. So that was one of my last indie shows I've been to. But how do you feel about Trisha Dora and her title reign?
I would say she's had a pretty decent title reign, even though it's been hurt by the pandemic, unfortunately. But she's been, doing the best she can, and I love that match she had with. I actually like the match she had with the guy that she beat in Darius Lockhart, who recently appeared on Black Wrestling Podcast, in which he talked about the main goal that he wants to accomplish is winning the Pan African World Diaspora World Championship belt from her. So, man, when they have their next match, it's going to be amazing. I cannot wait to see that match.
Yes, I hope that by that time, like, the pandemic is, we've gone back to the new normal, and everyone's the numbers are going down, and we're safe, and we can safely return. But I would love to see that match live again, because they're based in DC, so I'm in DC and they're based in DC, so I've had an opportunity to go to all their shows. Yeah,
and it's always a very good. Wrestling's always much better with more fans than the no fans that you see in the Thunderdome.
I mean, they're adapting to our new normal, so.
but I don't like the synthetic crowd noises. The synthetic crowd noises irritate me.
Yeah, I think they turn them up really loud. If they dial them down a little bit, it won't be so bad.
Yeah. So what do you think about this year's draft happening in the Thunderdome?
With the draft, I feel like there's some shakeups, but I wanted more shakeups because my issue with WWE is that you don't get to see a lot of new matchups.
No. And you know what? I actually told you this. It's, Raw, especially Raw, is basically Groundhog Day. It's the same thing over and over and over again. It's like you're seeing 23 different versions of the exact same thing that you had already seen already.
Yeah, and I want to see new matchups. And sometimes they hold off on these new matchups until like a certain pay-per-view, and then by that time you kind of lose interest and you move on to another matchup. So like that's my issue, and I felt like they should have done more with the draft. Like there should have been some more shakeups, and we should be getting I don't want to see Rollins, Murphy, Rey Mysterio, Dominic anymore. Like we've seen it.
Man, that storyline's been so done to death for the past 6 months. And not only that, the Randy Drew thing has been done to death, and now we're going to get a match for the WWE Championship between these two men again next Monday night.
Yeah.
Nobody cares for that match.
So that's my issue with it. Like, I don't like. I want to see Dominic and Ray fight maybe the Street Profits or, some other tag team on SmackDown. And I want to see Rollins move on to, maybe Kevin Owens or Daniel Bryan or someone. I just want to see new stuff, new content, like new matchups. That's my issue with it. Like, we see a lot of the same matchups over and I mean, I guess it works if there's a rivalry, like Sasha Banks versus Bayley.
Yeah.
But if it's not really, I mean, maybe Dominic and Rollins are like rivals now. I mean, who knows? Maybe I'm looking at it from the wrong angle. I don't know.
And speaking of the Sasha Bayley match from Hell in a Cell was absolutely amazing. But
Yes.
the fan that kind of balled it down for me in regards to that match, no fans. The virtual fans in the Thunderdome.
I mean, do you think they should have waited?
Yeah, I think they should have waited until they had real fans in attendance next year. And they completely rushed that feud, man, which I hated, by the way.
I mean, in their defense, they might have just feel like they don't know when fans are going to be able to come back. I mean, if you look at the news, the numbers are rising here. Maybe when we get a new president, which we have a president-elect, Joe Biden, maybe we can start working on the pandemic in this country and get our numbers down, and we can return to a new normal. I always say a new normal because I feel like we're going to be wearing masks for a while. We're going to be using hand sanitizer for a while, and things are not going to be the way it was exactly. But you know what I mean? Like, maybe we get to a point where we can have shows with more people. Maybe WWE just didn't want to wait. They didn't know how long it would take.
The way they went about the whole Sasha Bayley thing, they're like, you know what? We let y'all sheep wait for 5 years. Since y'all are absolutely fickle, we're going to give you this match already, so that way we can, forget about this, because we're going to promote Becky versus Ronda at WrestleMania.
So I want to talk about Black women in the wrestling industry. And as a Black woman, I do not appreciate how Black women are treated. And as a Black man, do you notice like how Black women are treated, right? Do you notice?
Yeah, I get very angry and offended when I see Black women get mistreated and disrespected, especially in the case of the Carter Gill Brandy segment on Dynamite, when those two women got disrespected, and particularly Brandy, even though I didn't like her fake hood girl accent that she came out with. But anyway, the segment is the very first ever segment in wrestling history in which two Black women opened up a primetime wrestling show with a segment. That had never before been done.
Yeah, and we don't really see a lot of Black women interacting in wrestling.
Nah, because they tend to keep Black women away from each other in wrestling for the most part, which is always something that's been annoying.
Yeah, and I mean, like you said, like we could talk about the promo. Like, I feel like there's a lot of layers to it, and it can be a little complex. Like, I didn't like that she used. It seemed like she had like a Black scent, so to speak, or she code switched when she was interacting with another Black woman. You know what I mean? Like, that's where it got really weird to me, because like I haven't seen her like talk like that to.
No. The segment was good with Carter Gill coming out there, cutting that, nice little promo. It was at 100. But when Brandy came out with the fake, hood girl accent, it went down to a 0.
And so, and then one thing I found interesting, that if you look at the social media comments, particularly on Facebook, on Twitter, you notice that it's like a tale of two Americas. Because we as Black people, we picked up on some things.
Yeah.
But non-Black people may not have. Some people didn't. And I saw a lot of people saying, "Oh, I love it. This is the best we've seen from Brandy." And, I know Brandy gets a lot of like, sometimes people kind of pile on Brandy. Sometimes sometimes it's necessary to, but I feel like also people don't know how to like critique and to give feedback to people nowadays. Most of the time people are very rude about it, but I feel like people do kind of like pile on Brandy. Like she's kind of like seen as this outsider.
Yeah, man, I would say ever since last year, she's been the victim of some of the most nasty, verbally racist attacks from particularly the cisgender white dudes in the internet wrestling community on Twitter, and it got so bad to the point where she just decided to cancel Twitter.
Like she gets it sometimes. Like I seen someone being very like derogatory, like some of the tweets, not all of them, but of course like on Twitter. But that's the thing, like we have to support and protect black women in wrestling, because like if we don't, who will?
Yeah, exactly. So that's why I'm always for sticking up and defending black women, even though I may not agree with some of the decisions or the choices or the promos or the matches that they have, but I still support them regardless.
And I feel like also black women, like you see a lot of times, like if I just like I try not to go through the comment section, I try not to look at the tweets, but something inside of me just like I do it anyway. But if you look at the comments, you'll see, like this black female wrestler can't wrestle, like she's no good, like you know what I mean? Like it's a lot of criticism that's unnecessary, and I don't even see where it's based at. Like it's just pure fiction to me.
And I remember Big Swole she basically clapped back against these trolls who said that she can't even wrestle with a damn.
Like, to me, I'm like, where's that coming from? Like, is it because she's a black woman? Like,
that's how I feel. To them, you have to be a blonde that can. If you're a blonde with, especially in Vince's eyes, and can wrestle, you're going to get praised by the internet wrestling community. If you're a black female, that especially a talented one, you're going to get critiqued. Especially when Bianca Belair had to deal with that during her time in NXT. And they said things like, she didn't come from the Indies. I said, what does that have anything to do with her right now in NXT? Nothing.
Yeah, so that's why I always say, like, I want to use this platform to build up black women in wrestling, because it can be... Black women are held to on a different standard. People are very misogynistic, misogynar with black women, and you don't hear people talking about this on the main screen, like podcasts or people writing about it.
And the reason why we talk about these type of racial issues that we talk about is because they don't want to alienate their predominant cisgender white male audience.
Yeah, I can see that. Yeah, and and it's not good. Like it's not a good thing, and that's why I'm happy that we have more black women, with podcasts, more black women writing. It's just good to see. It's good to see. It makes me happy. Like I like seeing the more black women talking about wrestling and in the wrestling industry.
Because for far too long, women, especially black women, have been shamed, ridiculed, and frowned upon for loving, let alone talking about wrestling. And nowadays, with the power of social media and stuff like that, it's changing and for the better, and I like that.
So just to kind of transition to one black woman who was just signed by AEW, and we mentioned Jade Cargill. What are your thoughts on Jade being all elite?
Oh man, hey, I'm all for it as long as it helps improve the women's division there, because they definitely need more and more talented women. I feel like they haven't been doing the best job in trying to give these women more TV time, let alone from the matches to the promos to developing their character. They got to give these women more time. They can't just say, we're going to have a quote-unquote stat card full of men and, forget these men, we'll just push them on Dark. No, they got to be on Dynamite, displaying their character, more time with the matches and promos and segments and stuff like that.
Yes, and I don't know if you recall the comments by Dr. Britt Baker, and she was saying like you have to support, you can't change the channel. And I kind of think AEW has this mindset that we want you to support our women's division no matter what, and then we'll give you more. And as a fan, I want you to give me more. I mean, I support, like me personally, I support because I want to support them, as much as possible. But as a fan, I'm like, no, like we want you to give us more so we can continue to support.
Despite their, Divas era-like views, and this is very reminiscent of the current WWE product outside of NXT, by the way. It's kind of like Vince is like, you know what? Since y'all fickle pieces of sheep are addicted to this garbage that I give you every week on Raw, we're going to just keep feeding you the garbage until you can't get enough because it's such good shit.
So you think that's what AEW is doing with their women's division? They're just going along.
Let's just give you sheep, 3 5-8 minute matches because it's such good shit.
So yeah, I mean, and AEW has the talent with the women, and they have Big Swole, they have Nyla Rose, they have Hikaru Shida, they have so many talented women, and I think they just need to give these women time. Yeah. Let them cut promos. Like, one thing I like about AEW is that they do their promos sometimes differently. Like, they have vignettes. Let these women like do a vignette and show it on Dynamite.
Yeah, that's the one thing that differs from AEW and WWE. One of the biggest difference, because on the main roster, in particular, if you know, the promos are heavily scripted, word by word, and micromanaged by mostly cisgender white men who are from Hollywood who know nothing about wrestling, and these wrestlers on the main roster go out there and cut these cheesy, boring, awful promos.
So I want to also talk about AEW in general and black wrestlers in AEW. And this has been a common discussion about AEW needs more black representation in their company, in the singles division, especially with the men. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I remember AJ Gray, kind of, offer constructive criticism and say, hey, man, how come y'all ain't got too many black men in the singles division? And then, I remember he got a lot of flack for it for the wrong reason, because he was just speaking truth to power, and he's not afraid to say what needs to be said. Too many, some black wrestlers are afraid to say what needs to be said for fear of being blackballed or gaslighted from the business. So I actually agree with AJ Gray. There's got to be more black men in the singles division too.
Yeah, definitely in the singles division. I think right now it looks like, but this is tag team though. But it looks like Top Flight is coming in. They have a couple matches on Dark, and then they have a match against the Young Bucks.
Yeah, they got that big match against the Young Bucks. It's funny because I have a history with the name Top Flight. Let me tell you a story about Top Flight. For many years, I used to live in a neighborhood where right around the street, about, I'll say 5 minutes, there used to be a nightclub called Top Flight. Yep, that's a true story, by the way. And I remember sometimes my older brothers would hang out outside the nightclub, and I would even sometimes go out around there and hang out outside the nightclub.
Yeah, and with Top Flight, the tag team, we saw them on Black Wrestlers Matter, and for the culture, they were there. So it's really cool to see them, mainstream.
This will definitely, raise their profile and bring more exposure to them. Because when I think about the name Top Flight, the wrestlers, I think about the flippy stuff.
Yeah, let's talk about that, because I know you kind of don't like a lot of flipping in wrestling.
Yeah, one of my problems with modern day wrestling, I feel like there's too much of an overemphasis on the acrobatic gymnastics and not enough, storytelling and psychology and chemistry. Because back in the day when we used to watch wrestling growing up, there was more technical, based story, psychology, and chemistry. But now, in a lot of these matches, especially on AEW and the Indies and even NXT and the main roster, there are too many wrestlers who do too much of that flippy stuff, and it's kind of irritating to me because I love these slow paced, psychology based driven matches. Like Roman and Jey Uso at Clash of the Champions.
Yeah, that's actually been a really good storyline. And actually, I'm happy, but I'm also kind of upset because I feel like if WWE can give us such a good storyline with Roman and Jay, why can't they do that for other wrestlers? Why can't we get that with, the whole card, get that kind of experience of this really nice emotional storyline?
Yeah, and I have a feeling this will lead to the Roman versus Rock match next year at WrestleMania 37.
Is that your prediction?
I have a feeling it's going to lead to that because this will be the battle of the real tribal chief.
Everybody who's listening, you heard it like first here. That's his prediction. Rock versus Roman, WrestleMania. And I think they're supposed to be in Hollywood, right? Next year?
Yeah, in Hollywood. But I heard that Hollywood is in, that WrestleMania 37 in Hollywood could be in jeopardy. If they can't have it there, they'll move it, to Tampa.
Interesting. So to kind of wrap up this conversation, which has been really good, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. I want to talk about you as a person. Like, what are some of the hobbies that you enjoy, and if there's anything you want to promote or talk about or educate people about, that'll be cool. And then I'm gonna come back to you with your top 5 favorite matches of 2020, and I'm telling you this now so you can have time to prepare and think. But first, let's talk about you, any hobbies. You have any hobbies that you have been perfecting or you've had for years?
Well, one, I love watching anime. My Hero Academia is my favorite right now. And I'm looking forward to season 5 when it comes out next year. And secondly, I've been a long-time gamer, by the way, a video gamer. And I've been playing up on the Nintendo Switch quite a bit. And recently, I played my favorite video game of the year, Streets of Rage 4, which I beat that, by the way. and now I'm playing Hyrule Warriors Age of Calamity, the demo. I'm playing the demo, and man, that game is so fun.
Yeah, that's actually one thing that I have gotten back into kind of the last couple months is video games. I started playing my Nintendo 3DS, the extra large one that I got last year for Christmas that you know how you get something for Christmas and you play for a little bit and then you don't play with it again? Yeah, I'm back to playing with my Nintendo 3DS.
You want to know what? I'm going to tell you a true story. I remember, when I was a kid, I asked my grandmother, could you buy me a Sega Genesis for my birthday? And on my 10th birthday, by the way, which is my favorite birthday, I got what I wanted. I got a Sega Genesis with a 6-pack cartridge, and I absolutely was so happy and just ecstatic that day that I got a Sega Genesis with a 6-pack cartridge for my birthday. That's all I wanted. And then my favorite, Christmas was 3 years late, 3 years after that, where I got Nintendo 64 for Christmas. And I remember the first games that I remember playing were Doom 64 and GoldenEye 007. I love those games, by the way, especially GoldenEye 007, because my favorite weapon in the game was the chopper. And I think you know about the term chopper.
Yeah, I do.
I used to love chopping up bodies with that weapon in GoldenEye.
So I've gotten back into gaming, and you said anime. I'm a blerd myself. If I'm not watching wrestling, I'm doing blerdy things, and I'm going to I love going to the Comic Cons and blerd cons.
Oh my goodness, I love going to these comic conventions. I was supposed to go to one in March of this year, but unfortunately, the organizers had to cancel in the last minute due to the pandemic. And to me, that was devastating.
Have you ever been to BlerdCon?
Oh no, I've never been to BlerdCon, but I've heard about it, which is a really nice Comic Con of blerds like you and I.
Yeah, it's I think it's 3. So it's in my area. It's in Arlington, Virginia. And when it's in the area, I don't really stay overnight or anything. I just go home to save money. So I believe it's 3 days. I usually go on Saturday. But when this pandemic is over, I want to go to Comic Cons. I want to spend like all weekend there. Something fresh for the new normal or whatever. But yeah, definitely you should check out BlerdCon. Where are you located, by the way?
I'm located in Alabama.
Oh, you're in Alabama. Cool. Like, yeah, so it's in Virginia, BlerdCon. So, and it's usually in the summer, like around August, July, but I definitely recommend it for you, and I actually recommend it for everyone that's listening. If you're a blerd, or if you are just a nerd, you don't have to be a blerd. Definitely check out BlerdCon. Like, it is cool. It's a cool experience.
Yeah, and another thing was that prior to this conversation that we're having, about a few weeks ago, Hurricane Zeta packed a mighty punch here in Alabama. The neighborhood that I lived in, there was this massive blackout in the neighborhood I lived in. This blackout lasted for 30 hours.
Oh wow! You guys have lights?
Yeah, lights on now, but I'm like, a few weeks ago, this lasted for like 30 hours, the longest blackout period I have ever experienced in my life. And this adds on to 2020 being the 5th worst year of my life, because it's basically the pandemic year, the year that nothing really happened that much.
Yeah, actually, every time one of my friends actually checked in, one of my college friends checked in on me, and she was like, I said, I don't really remember anything from the last thing I remember, and this is actually wrestling related. The last thing I remember is attending Raw in Washington, D.C. on March 9th, the live show. It was actually my cousin's birthday, and that's what she wanted to do. She wanted to like hang out, and then one of the things we were going to do is go to Raw, and that's the last thing I really remember. Raw, yeah, it's been a year, and so it's been a year, and that's why I'm going to ask you, what are your top 5 matches of 2020?
Number 5 for me, after number 5, 2 of those top 5 I already talked about earlier. Number 5 was AJ Gray versus Desmond Xavier at Fulton Culture, which I talked about earlier. Number 4 was ACH versus JDS at Black Wrestlers Matter, which I talked about earlier. Number 3 was Bayley versus Sasha at Hell in a Cell. Man, the chemistry, the psychology, the storytelling, man, was phenomenal. But as good as that match was, I still like the TakeOver Brooklyn match from 2015 better, because it was in front of real fans and the crowd was electric.
Yes.
My number 2 match was the parking lot brawl that we saw back in September, between, the Best Friends and, Pride and Powerful. Man, I love that match, despite the fact that the outcome kind of pissed me off, but I love that match. It was basically just good old tag team wrestling, no flips or flops, just straight up tag team wrestling. I loved it. But my number 1 favorite match of the year was Okada versus Kota Ibushi at Wrestle Kingdom 14.
Ooh.
This was in front of real fans. This match was absolutely spectacular. This was like pure wrestling right here, pure technical based psychology, storytelling, chemistry driven wrestling at its finest. And man, I just absolutely could not get enough of that match. That was my favorite match of the entire Wrestle Kingdom event this year.
So before I go, and I really enjoyed talking with you, hopefully, you can come back in the future. Maybe if we do a round table, I'll definitely have you on the panel, because, you are a phenomenal writer, and, you bring a good viewpoint to modern day wrestling, and I appreciate that, and I love it. But before we go, what are your predictions and your wrestling predictions for the remainder of 2020?
Man, my wrestling predictions, I don't really have much wrestling predictions, because most of this year is like a blur for me as well. So I'm looking forward to 2021 and get out this god-awful year.
Okay. All right. Thank you so much. Everybody, give a warm round of applause for Kwame Shakir. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Kwame Shakir, for joining me on DDT Divas The Podcast and just talking wrestling. It was fun, And I hope it was fun for the listeners as well, because it was really fun for me as a host. And I really enjoyed my time, and actually I hope to have Kwame back on in the near future, and we can just talk about wrestling. And if you enjoyed this episode, please be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel, join our Discord, follow us on Twitter and Instagram, and like the DDT Divas Facebook page. Never miss a tweet, post, article, or podcast episode. And to those who haven't missed anything thus far, thank you. Thank you for your support, and thank you for listening. Until the next episode, be safe, be well, continue to enjoy wrestling.
We hope you have enjoyed the show.